So I got a good example here. We got this story from Business Insider. Anti-Vaxxers storm a New York Cheesecake factory in protest that ends in 6 arrests. That's the story. Anti-Vaxxer is a funny term. These are basically anti-mandate protests.
So that's me.
They showed up to the Cheesecake Factory. They were apparently refused to be seated, so they decided to seat themselves, is my understanding. And then the manager was like, "You can't be in here." The police showed up. They said, "We're not going to leave." They were chanting things like that.
Are they anti-vax for the first shot, the second shot, the third shot, or the fourth shot? Because there are there are a lot of people who did take the shot that don't want it to be mandated on people, and they're still being called anti-vaxxers when they took the shot themselves.
I think they were for the first, not the second. Not the third, but the fourth. They're for the fourth.
It totally makes sense.
I have a friend.
But these are people putting skin on the line. These are people coming into a restaurant peacefully saying, "Hey, we want some service here." The restaurant comes up to them, says, "Hey, we have to comply with this rule and this rule and this rule and this rule with the federal government." And they said, "You know what? No. We're not going to comply with the government whims that you demand of us." And then they're like, "Okay, we're going to call the police." They called the police. The police carried out these orders and these decrees by, of course, the bureaucrats, and they arrested these people.
I think there's an interesting, sort of middle ground here. Watching these videos, it was very reminiscent of watching leftist protests as well. The protesters did not understand what was going on. They were saying, "You can't kick us out. It's a public accommodation. We're allowed to be here." And it's like, bro, you can be told to leave. Well, the police aren't there because of the vax mandates. They're there because you're trespassing.
Exactly. A private business has a right to exclude you from business, but that's not the argument that a lot of people on the left make, saying you do have to bake the cake. You do have to provide a service no matter what. So these people are using the same arguments, and a lot of people are bringing in parallels to this, to what happened in the 1960s with some of the restaurant sit-ins that happened then that was fighting against discrimination. And there is a lot of discrimination, a lot of segregation that deserves to be pushed back, that violates human rights, that's being called on by bureaucrats, by big statists who are violating the most sacred right of all, the right to exist, the right to be able to buy food and water. And that's incredulous and crazy.
So yeah, that's where I go to real quick. Like, I thought that food was an essential service. Now, maybe you could argue, oh, well, you don't have a right to go to Cheesecake Factory or Delmonico Steakhouse or McDonald's.
But it's not just that. It's also supermarkets.
But in all of the mandates that I've seen, there is a carve out for grocery stores, because I think that they knew that they would get
not in some places, not in some places like in Canada, where they give the right for supermarkets to discriminate against people, and in Australia and in many other places.
Australia is so many friends that are Aussies, and that's insane. I think the thing that you mentioned about like bodily autonomy and like your individual healthcare rights, it's kind of funny how the left used to say like healthcare was a human right and like your body, your choice until now. I get really annoyed by the people that try to make the comparison to the Hobby Lobby case, because I tweeted earlier tonight that your employer should not be able to tell you like what to put in your body or what to do with your body, especially if it's not a detriment to your job performance or the safety of those around you. And people were like, "Oh yeah, but what about Hobby Lobby?" And I'm like, Hobby Lobby didn't tell their employees, "No, you can't take contraceptives." They said, "We are morally opposed to paying for that."
Yeah.
And then I've also had people, because like I said, I'm a home birth hippie. They're like, "Well, your employer knew you were having a home birth." I'm like, the only reason that Jeremy Boring knew I was having a home birth is because I talk about it all the time. And I try to convince people to do the same thing. And I love being a doula. I'm like, but your employer doesn't know your birth plan. Your employer doesn't know what vaccines you're going to give your kids. Your employer doesn't know any of that stuff. Your insurance company that your employer subsidizes does, but not the employers. And now you have like Kroger grocery stores, which they own Ralph's in California.
Really?
And I legitimately, I'm like, I spend thousands of dollars a month at Ralph's. I will find a different grocery store.